Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me is...
The Wrong Man, Slevin Kalevra.
And we watched The Wrong Man.
Did we though, or did we watch Lucky Number Slevin?
I contend, here's my controversy, The Wrong Man's a better title for this film, both commercially and story-wise.
Yeah, it's so we have our regular things we have to do, which is we have to do synopsis and we have to do facts, but I do think because it is so confusing, particularly because of where we're living in Australia, that we should clarify. We talked about it briefly last week, but the film we're watching this week is, I'm going to say Lucky Number Slevin because that is actually the dominant title.
It's the correct title.
It's the correct title in most territories. So we watched a film called Lucky Number Slevin, but it was one of those films that got a localized title just in Australia, inexplicably, when it was released as The Wrong Man. So now if you look it up on streaming or Apple, you can type either Lucky Number Slevin or The Wrong Man and you might get the film. But honestly, it's kind of a mess. Like really, I was just having a bit of a play with this, and sometimes you'll type Lucky Number Slevin and you will get the title card for The Wrong Man, but the name of the film is Lucky Number Slevin, depending on the streaming service or, Apple iTunes or whatever it is you're using. So for the sake of clarity, we will just call it Lucky Number Slevin today because that's what the film is known as in most territories, but it is one of those bizarre localization things. So would you like a synopsis of this cinematic delight? This was my pick this week, so my turn for the synopsis.
I really would, because I'd like to see if I understood the film.
Look, we don't usually say this because it's assumed on our particular podcast, but spoilers, okay? I'm gonna say spoilers for this particular synopsis. If you haven't seen the film and are kind of on the fence or were like, I don't know, sometimes I watch it after they talk about it, that probably is not a good idea for this particular film.
It's legit a horrible one.
So yeah, so not a horrible film, but I don't know what Ben thinks of it. But like, look, if you're gonna watch it before you listen to this synopsis and hear us talk about it, because it's that kind of film. So you have been warned. All right, let's do it. Slevin Kalevra, played by Josh Hartnett, arrives in New York to visit his friend Nick Fisher, but Nick is missing. Mistaken for Nick, Slevin is dragged into a feud between two rival crime bosses, the boss, played by Morgan Freeman, and the rabbi, played by Ben Kingsley, who both claim that Nick owes them money. The boss orders Slevin to kill the rabbi's son to settle the debt. Meanwhile, a mysterious hitman, Mr. Goodcat, played by Bruce Willis, is eliminating those connected to Nick. As events unfold, Slevin's true identity is revealed. He is actually Henry, a boy whose family was murdered years ago by the boss and the rabbi over a rigged gambling debt. Raised and trained by Mr. Goodcat, Slevin orchestrated the entire scheme as revenge, systematically killing both crime lords and their men. Lindsay, played by Lucy Liu, is Nick's neighbor and Slevin's love interest, and she is caught in the crossfire but ultimately spared. After completing his vengeance, Slevin chooses to stay with Lindsay, leaving the audience to question whether she can truly accept the truth about him.
Yeah, you nailed it.
That was quite difficult. That was not a short process to arrive at that particular synopsis.
That was succinct. All right, so released in 2006, directed by Paul McQuiggan, The Reckoning, Wicker Park, and Push. Wicker Park also with Josh Hartnett. Written by Jason Smilovic. War Dogs is pretty much his only other film. That's the Jonah Hill film. Starring Josh Hartnett, Morgan Freeman, Ben Kingsley, Lucy Liu, Stanley Tucci. I'm Tucci Gang for Life. Bruce Willis. I have Maketi Wilson and Denny Aiello. Question. I'm going to say his name again even though I had trouble pronouncing it. Mykelti Williamson. Do you know what he is most famous for? He is the one.
No.
He is the thug, the big thug for the boss that picks up our man Slevin from the apartment at first time.
Who's got like a real prominent like mouth acting going on.
And that's your clue. Do you know what he is most famous for?
No.
He is Bubba from Forrest Gump. I was
That makes sense.
I was looking at him
That
going,
makes so much
I
sense.
know him. He's famous. What is he? And I had to look it up. And yeah, he's Bubba from Forrest Gump.
There you go.
Budget of 27 million, box office of 56.3 million. Yeah, so them's the facts. I just want to quickly touch on the budget and box office. This was a distribution deal, which is something we haven't spoken much of in this podcast, in that this movie was paid for and made by its financial backers and then sold to a studio. And that studio was one that is not really around anymore, the Weinstein Co. And Weinstein's paid $10 million for this film. So back in the day when this movie was released and a little bit before, they actually had a really successful financial model of doing this, purchasing a film for fairly cheap, not actually producing it and making it, and then selling it on to distribute it. And hence people would say, a $27 million film with a 56 million return is not crazy successful. But when you think about it from the Weinstein's point of view, it was actually a $10 million film with a $56 million return, which is actually really tidy profit.
Yeah, this is a very common financial and distribution scheme, particularly in the independent film world. So, and even what we would, I guess with this film, we'd probably call it more like that hybrid studio independent, but it's still more of an independent film model. And it is very lucrative, actually, if you get it right, to the point where you can even do it with bigger budget films, like perhaps the biggest one from recent history, because it still happens, is Luc Besson's Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. That film, when it came out, everyone was like, this is a flop. And if you look at the box office numbers, it didn't look very good. And he was like, it's fine. And it was like, what? It was like, he basically cited this exact type of distribution deal where, the cash was raised and the film was paid for before it was then, actually released. And he's like, I have no problem here. So it can actually be a very lucrative deal. And it means that the box office numbers don't always look perhaps the way you would expect, So yeah, look, were they all the facts, Ben, or had you stopped partway through?
Nope, them's the facts.
So Lucky Number Slevin is a film that I discovered when I was working at a video store. I worked at several video stores.
So a video store was this thing where people would physically visit it, pick up a physical DVD or VHS, go home, watch it, and then return it back to the video store.
Yeah. I was about to say, if you are, basically younger than us, you probably don't know what this is. But yes, as Ben says, it's a store that just had videos in it. And what happened when I was working at this DVD store is I would often watch movies that were new at the time but weren't widely distributed, which is exactly how I found this film, because I was like, hadn't heard of it. It came and went with kind of a whisper. But it was like, but I'm like, it has Morgan Freeman, Stanley Tucci, Josh Hartnett, Lucy Liu, Ben Kingsley. And I was like, what? Bruce Willis. And I was just like, how are all these people in this film and I've never heard of it or seen it or, anything. Yeah. And of course, the distribution model and the fact that it was sort of a studio indie kind of alludes to how that happened. But still, it was enough to pique my interest. And I got it and watched it. And I actually thought, this is actually a really good movie. So in my opinion. So we'll talk about the things that I really liked about it, but I already kind of know that you, having watched it, and you said you'd seen it before, but you couldn't remember it. You weren't perhaps as glowingly positive, at least at the start of the film, at which point I texted you and said, stop texting me, save it for the podcast. So I don't know what that was the opening of the film and you weren't sold, but what happened in the time since then?
I've realized it's not this film's fault. This film is actually a good representation of its genre. I don't like the genre. So my problem is, right, I love the turn and reveal. One of my favorite things in film, in noir and in murder mystery and things like that. That's effectively the last 15, 20 minutes of any film with this genre. Or 10 minutes of a TV show. I've grown up with family members who are obsessed with Agatha Christie TV shows, right? And I get really frustrated. I just want to know. I just want to know what the thing is, right? I don't want to watch 25 minutes of a TV show to find out what this thing is. So I think that's what I suffered from in this film, right? I didn't remember it. I'm pretty sure I've seen it, but I didn't really remember it. I worked out some of the twists partway through because, I mean, they're not particularly hiding it well with the whole Henry thing, right? But the whole, like, how it's done, I was waiting for, and I enjoyed that bit. I enjoy the explanation. I enjoy the revenge. I enjoy the finalization of the job. It's just the everything in between. Noir also has a cadence to it, a language, and I don't particularly click with that. It's very kind of like, what's the word? Like, it's very...
It's an artificial constructed dialogue.
It's like
that
a
is
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern-y kind of to and fro, was what I was...
Yes.
Yeah. And which is fine. There's some fun wordplay in there. But again, I kind of bounce off it a little bit. And I think it's because the original film noirs back in the day were fine, but the new modern film noir always feels like a copy, always feels like archaic in its use of that language to me, which is fine. But yeah, so I actually think this movie is a good movie. I really do. It's just not a Ben movie until the turn. Until the reveal. I love the reveal. I enjoy that bit quite a bit. But yeah, no, before that, it rocks me a little bit. Like Josh Hartnett, his character is interesting, and you learn that like he fears no kind of worldly consequence. Traxia or whatever he says his thing is.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one. So he says in the film, I've got ataraxia, which is, basically I don't have freedom from worry or concern, which is a made up condition. This is not a real
it's not a
thing.
medical term, it's a philosophical term. It's from like Stoicism and things like that.
But I always found that fascinating as sort of a self-described character trait, and it does actually match with what he's portraying in the movie. But of course, this is at the point in time in the film where half, maybe more, of what he's saying is just lies. So they're very well constructed lies, and they're lies that are told very casually.
Is he free from worry because he's actually in control?
Yes, which is exactly what you get, because later in the film, when Lindsay is actually put in danger, you see him worry for the first time, because she was obviously part of the plan that was not part of the plan. And, he then has something to lose, because his entire life up until then, from really the point where he is spared by he has nothing to lose. It's just him on his own, and that makes sense as to why he is free from worry, because he doesn't value his own life. He really exists just for this revenge. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say, at least acknowledge that you think the movie's good, because this movie got some criticism which I think was really unfair upon release. If you look at, even the reviews now on Rotten Tomatoes and things, like people, for some reason, and this happens in the critical world, quite often, someone says something and everybody else sort of piles on a little bit, like, because I don't know, but it seems a little bit like there's a bit of copycat there, and people were sort of like, oh, it's an off-brand Tarantino film. And I look at this movie and I'm like, this is actually, sure, yes, Bruce Willis was in a Tarantino movie, and he's in this movie, but it's so different tonally. It's so different in overall style and what they're actually doing. I don't think it's an off-brand Tarantino movie at all. I think it's very much its own flavor, its own style, and as you say, Jason Smilovic has said, I was more inspired by Dashiell Hammett, detective novels, and the way that they speak, and I wanted to do an update of that. He wasn't really thinking about Tarantino. And look, Paul McGuigan just does what Paul McGuigan does. Like, as the director, he's someone who's got, this crazy kind of style, which we must talk about in this podcast, because I love it.
I've never heard the comparison with this film.
Yeah, right.
I would never, if someone had said to me like, hey man, that's a Tarantino film, I'd be like, nah, no, it's not. Like, there's nothing Tarantino in this film. Use of language, shots, construction, even pacing is not correct here. I would have, if someone had said, hey man, this is like one of Guy Ritchie's first films, I would have been, oh, okay. Yep, that makes sense. But again, there's differences. There's feel, there's all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like, it's not it's not even close to the same. Like, yeah, you've got an actor in common. Again, that actor is not doing anything similar. And you've got this kind of, you don't have the soliloquies that happen in a Tarantino film. You don't have the kind of verbose nature, the aping of it. So like Tarantino quite often is inspired by and apes a genre, right? That's not what's happening here. This film is its genre. Like it is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, look, but ultimately, I really like the movie. I think Josh Hartnett's character is fantastic too. I think he plays it so well. And then I think also the character is written so well. Like the writing is something, I know you say you struggled with it, but I love the writing. Like, the idea that some of this dialogue where he sort of says, where do you find names in a book? Who has books? Bookies have books. Like, and that's sort of like as you're watching this sort of thing unfold, and just that patter, that back and forth, it is quite artificial. It's not realistic, but it's not supposed to be. It's really this hyper realistic, hyper stylized kind of
Yeah.
world and dialogue that really fits together very well, just like a puzzle box. And I love listening to that. And I love actually watching characters as they cover that.
It is a very crafted script, like very crafted. It's the sort of thing that they would have had to go back over multiple times to make sure that different references fit for later in the film. Like there is care and love in this script. And I mean, yeah, the language isn't my type of engaging language in a film, but I did enjoy, especially Josh Hartnett's character's trait of correcting turn of phrase and grammar within speech. I found that enjoyable because it's what kept getting him punched, for example.
Yes.
Like, it seemed like an unavoidable trait, like he had to do it, like it was part of who he was. And I enjoyed that. Like, again, it's just, my problem with this is genre. It's not my genre. But again, well written, well acted.
Yeah, I also want to talk a bit about the visuals because this was my introduction to Paul McGuigan as a director. I've since then seen most of his films, and it's particularly because I love what he brings visually. So one thing, Paul McGuigan, you'll work out if you watch a few of his movies, and this one, it's especially prominent. He's a fan of wallpaper. Did you notice that, Ben?
Yeah.
He likes wallpaper.
He likes the character of space, the space he's in. And like whether it's walls or wallpaper or yeah, it's prominent.
It's just that like what he'll do is, and it's a great cheap set design, trope, but you rarely see it. It's very unique to him. But he puts wallpaper up that really fits the character and the scene. So, and it's all very big and it's all very patterned, and it creates this, very loud kind of visual look to a lot of the sequences. Like all of the hallways in the apartment buildings and hotels have, these geometric patterns which look kind of like a maze, which really actually then, takes you into the plot and the fact that nothing's quite what it seems and it's twisting and turning. You move into like Lucy Liu's character's apartment, Lindsay, and it's got these giant flower motifs all over her wallpaper. You move into Morgan Freeman's character's apartment, it's rich and decadent wallpaper with golds and reds. Like, so he's using it to really show us these characters and who they are. And like I said, Josh Hartnett, where you don't know who he is usually seen with that maze-like background. So I love when filmmakers do things like this because it allows the symbolism to play through in a very visual, very pronounced way that is interesting to look at.
At its simplest form too, it creates consistent geography, right? Like if you cut to a new scene, a lot of times, even without you knowing why, you know where you are because of visual clues like that. It's another form of scene geography. And I always appreciate that in a film as well. I hadn't noticed the extreme use of the wallpaper that you've gone through here, but I did notice the hallway. I did notice kind of like all those sort of things that there were kind of these geometric squiggles or maze patterns and things like that. So yeah, that's actually super interesting that is something that he carries across into other films.
Yeah. He does something else in this film specifically as well, which I really like. And one of the things, I rewatch films. You know this.
What?
I rewatch them.
It's almost like this whole podcast is predicated on that.
Yeah, so, and this, once you know what all of the twists are in this movie, McGuigan's style gives you plenty of reasons to come back and check in on things, like things like that wallpaper design that I was talking about. But also, if you look at the way he shoots flashbacks in this movie, at the start of the film, there's a flashback where Josh Hartnett is explaining to Lucy Liu's character what happened to him. And that particular flashback is shot at a different shutter speed to give a very jerky kind of motion, and it's also shot in black and white. And what you realize is that those two things together, one of them equals flashback and one of them equals lies. Later on in the film, when Lucy Liu tells a story to Josh Hartnett about something she did, we see the shutter speed, but we see it in color. And so we actually know that, okay, the black and white equals, that is just a lie, whereas the shutter speed equals a flashback. I love it when they make those kinds of connections. If you're a savvy enough audience member, and I'm not claiming that I was when you watch it the first time, you can actually see that before it's actually revealed. You know, there are visual clues to say, this is not true, okay, but it is a flashback, and this is also a flashback, but this one is true, right? So it's nice and it's defined in that way, which is great when you return to it later, you know?
I think the genius of that sort of filmmaking too, in general, is you don't actually have to pick up on it to benefit from it. Like a good storyteller, a good director uses these tricks, uses these visual moments to tell a story. And yeah, your brain might not pick up on the reason why this is different or why this is thing. So talking about the shutter, right? Like flashback. What it does is throughout the film, it trains you. It trains you to recognize, oh, we're in a flashback. You might not say we're in a flashback because it's shuddering. You might just say it feels the same as the other flashbacks. I think that's really important in understanding cinema and directorial styles, because that sort of stuff also does go across film as well. But yeah, like it's really important, like, because I know some people who watch film, and I'm kind of half in this camp. They just kind of stop, sit, and absorb. They don't analyze as they watch. They don't try to solve the film. They don't look at the techniques. They don't look at all these things. And then afterwards, when somebody says the things you're saying, they're like, oh, I did see that. I just didn't technically put that together, but I did feel that. I did emote that. And I think that's really kind of important, because sometimes people do introduce those techniques and all you see is the technique. You don't feel the thing, right? This film, you feel the thing, which is, I think, really important.
And I should say as well, I realized just then I didn't actually explain what shutter speed was. I'm not going to get really detailed, but if you're not familiar, because I don't think it's something we've talked about on this cast before, we haven't had a reason to delve into it, but shutter speed is one of three techniques that it deals with the amount of light coming into a camera lens. And what shutter speed particularly controls is what we will call motion blur. So how blurry or sharp the image actually is. It's tied to frame rate and how fast the image is playing back, but it's not quite the same. And in the case here, that was something that was being manipulated in order to create, you know, a sort of stuttering kind of blurry image for those flashbacks. But again, specifically related to motion blur, not actual camera shake.
No.
And again, if you're like, that's boring, I don't care, that's where I live my life, in these places.
And it's also how the movies you love get made. Like it's the magic behind the magic. So I think it's always super interesting. And I realized my hand actions would have confused people too. I understood what you were saying. I was just kind of like, you know, yeah. So the other thing I want to talk about, I'm a characters guy. Like I love characters in film. I love thinking about what they do, how they react. Ben Kingsley and Morgan Freeman chew this movie up in such a wonderful way. Like a wonderful way. And in so subtly different ways. Like they could have easily been a parody of each other in this film, except one was, you know, Jewish and one was African American or black. But even their reactions to things, even like at their end, their deaths, they were kind of like very consistent, very wonderfully played characters. And I think even though he was subtler, Ben Kingsley was the more interesting to watch, in my opinion, of the two. And Morgan Freeman was fine, but Morgan Freeman was a bit more characterish. But yeah, I found them the two most engaging people in this film by far. Because part of me is like, I want to see the prequel.
Yeah, you got to think that, like, I love both of their performances. I think they were great for different reasons, but like, I think that these two guys had to have signed on to these roles for the chance to say these words to each other.
Yeah.
Like, it must have been that one of those cases where it's like, oh, it's going to be Ben Kingsley I'm playing against, and we're saying that, and we're playing that together. Like, fantastic. So, and when they actually do have their scene together at the end, when they're both tied to the chairs, that is some real dynamite stuff, and the looks when and it's awful what they're actually saying to each other. They are not nice people, but the acting of it when
Yeah.
Kingsley has realized that his son has died, and his disbelief and going through all of those emotions and grief and hatred, and Morgan Freeman on the flip side of that, relishing in this fact that he's killed his son, and just watching them play together is really something quite powerful. And then at the end of that scene, they both have to play, are they going to accept their fates, which is to die in that moment? So that's a huge scene for both of them, and really a powerhouse acting moment. And look, not to mention as well, Josh Hartnett's awesome in that scene too, like, because he's there and he is playing someone who is more powerful in that moment than these two men, and he's playing it very well, like, and really doing it in such a cold, calculating way that is somehow also full of emotion. Like, when he actually says, I did this to you, like, that's a great acting moment for him.
Well, his character is a bit strange in that he was a normal kid who was raised later on as a psychopath. He was
Yes.
raised to take those emotions down. So he would still have them, he just has more control over them. Whereas someone's like Bruce Willis's character is probably a genuine psychopath, right? Like Mr.
Yeah.
Good Cat. So it's kind of like he's playing at a thing, right? It's Morgan Freeman's refusing to accept that the rabbi didn't kill his son until he's directly told by the person who kills him is devastating, because you
Yes.
realize that he realizes that he's put himself in this position. Like,
Yes.
if he had just listened, I mean, if a lot of people in this film had just listened, like, people are given out, like, Josh Hartnett's character gives people outs in this film, strangely.
Yes.
He's like, I'm not the right guy. You should just let me go. And they
Yeah.
don't. And he's like, well, like,
I
yeah.
do have to say that I have one thing with this film that actually does sort of stick a little bit. There's something in the film that I don't think holds together in the way that I would like it to. So would you like to know what that thing is?
Yeah, and I'm guessing it's a symptom of its genre.
I really like this movie, I'll say that, but I do have one thing that feels like it's just a bridge too far for the film, and that is the resolution of Slevin and Lindsay in the movie. So, because functionally what happens here is, while we're with Slevin and while he is the protagonist, and he spends really the first 2/3 of the movie being very affable and getting us to like him, we then realize in the back third of the film that this is artificial, and this might be an aspect of his character, but really he had planned this all along, and he has this other side, this cold killer side. So now Lindsay is actually a normal person. Yes, she's a coroner, so she's been around death, but she, in the sense that she's been around death, I'm mentioning that because that's sometimes comes up as a justification for what I'm about to talk about, which I don't really think holds up. Do you know what I mean? Like, but she is a normal person. She's a little bit quirky, but she's functionally just a normal person. She falls for Slevin. And then at the end of the film asks us to accept that a normal person who has known somebody else for 24 hours would abandon her whole life and basically take up with him in a romantic way, knowing that in the past 24 hours, he has murdered maybe 12 people in cold blood. Like, that's what the film asks us to actually accept, right? And really, it also then, even though we know Slevin's a dark character, he plotted an entire revenge scheme, he's still the protagonist of the film. And it also points to a strange kind of power imbalance in the sense that, like, is he kind of like, maybe without thinking he's doing this, but is he kind of forcing her to stay with him? Like, she has very few options at the end of the film. She's basically like been complicit in, she's an accomplice to a lot of these murders. He's a very dangerous individual who she doesn't know very well. Is she actually even able to leave if she wanted to? So the film, I think, just to finish that thought, and then I'll throw to you with what you thought about that, but I think the film, and particularly with its genre, would absolutely have supported a version of the ending whereby he says, you know who I am now. Obviously, we can't be together because of what I am, and I'm going to let you go, and that, I think, is actually, sure, it's not a Hollywood ending, but it's a much stronger ending, and it allows him to be fully resolved as a character.
I think what you described is the correct ending. It is like the lone survivor, someone who has the story but probably won't tell it. At best, they've trauma bonded and their relationship is 6 months.
Yeah.
Because all they have is this trauma that keeps them together. You're right. It is very movie. It is very Hollywood of hero gets the girl. And it's not something I bumped off, but again, I've seen the movie effectively once. I remember seeing it once. So it's not something I've had time to kind of mull over because I've had the bigger parts of the story to contend with. But you're right, like it doesn't make sense. 24 to 48 hours at most that these two people have known each other. He's literally told her how to fake her own death in that time. She has done that. And, it's this kind of means to an end to give the character a bit of a lighter ending. A bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, because this character effectively has had a horrible life. Their whole family was murdered. They were raised by a world-class assassin, as that world-class assassin says himself. And, he has lived this life where he has murdered way more people than we've seen, or at least been a part of that. And as kind of like probably payment or a, hey, you're a good son, they have gone back and got revenge on the people who killed his family. This is not a normal relationship, but not normal relationships work all the time. So, hey, they may be happily ever after.
I think as well, like, if the film had actually, you might have gotten away with it just a little bit more if the film had been really careful to say that Slevin only, and this is again movie logic. This is not real world logic. This is movie logic that I'm about to describe. So please don't think I'm a psychopath, everybody, for what I'm about to say. But if Slevin had only done away with quote unquote bad people, then you might have gotten away with it a little bit, right? If he'd just gone after the two bosses who were clearly very guilty of lots of things, maybe even just, their henchmen who were at least mean to Slevin in the movie earlier. But unfortunately, Slevin has to kill several people who you would actually class as completely innocent in the world of the movie, or that we don't even know. Maybe they're guilty, maybe they're innocent, but we don't know. So we have to assume innocence, like the two sons of, I was
going to say, even if you found out later that he didn't actually kill the two sons, it looked like he did as part of the plan or whatever. Like,
you might have gotten away with that, but he actually, he straight up killed these two people.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? And they had nothing to do with his entire revenge plot, murder scheme. Do you know what I mean? Like any of that. So look, it is something where, but again, as you say, this is something that goes into the film for the satisfaction of the first viewing, whereby the audience wants the protagonist to, basically get away okay. You want a happy ending. And also, the first time you see the film, you haven't had a long time to dwell on the change of character for Slevin. So on first viewing, it plays. On multiple repeat viewings, it starts to fall apart. And so you could argue that actually it's fine because we only expect people to see it once and it plays that first time. But then it's like, is it supposed to hold up time 2, time 3, time 4? Like, because it kind of doesn't.
I also want to talk about something we don't talk about a lot in this, and that is there's a derogatory term used in this film over and over and over again to describe a character, and that is the rabbi's son, because he is gay, and they use it. They call him a fairy. I actually didn't have a problem with that usage in this film, and I'm not here to talk for a community or anything like that, but it fit genre and it fit time when this film was built. The whole idea that gangsters have this second name to them, and then that second name can be derogatory of their character, is very common even in modern gangster films, all these sort of things, right? And I was reading about this film before I watched it. Well, not the twists and stuff, just its business. And there are quite a few people online who bounced off this fact. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's weird, whatever. It even got censored in Russia, which is wild. But that's for different reasons because Russia's Russia, right? But yeah, like they had this whole thing, and I'm coming into this movie going, oh, okay, there's going to be a bit of a thing. When it was used, I'm just like, it's of theme. Yes, it's not a nice thing to say, but it's of theme. These characters aren't nice people. This world isn't nice, especially to somebody who is different than the world they're in, because he doesn't quite fit. And I'm like, okay, yes, it is a derogatory term to use, but I think it is correct usage in this world.
It's also internally consistent, you know, so it again, it's just part of the tapestry of that particular world.
But I just think we live in a world where people don't always take that into account. And I think it's important in the thing you're consuming to do so. Just because you wouldn't do that, that's not what a movie is. A movie isn't stuff you would do or you would say. A movie is something that you experience outside of yourself, something that is other of your day-to-day world. And I think that's a part of this. And I think it's actually really important. And I think there are some modern-day movies who suffer because they're afraid to do that still. And yeah, I don't know. I found it very interesting that this thing could be used in a way that actually made this movie probably a slightly better movie.
Yeah, well, I think I've probably reached the end of what I would like to share with you about Lucky Number Slevin. So
I got one more thing, and it's to do with the genre of this film. I want somebody out there, I'm not talented enough to do this, to make a whole film that is just the reveal. Because that's the best part of the movie. Like when my family's...
Sorry, I know I said I was finished. I don't actually agree with that, by the way, that it's the best part of the movie. I love the build-up. I love learning who the characters are, what their stories were, how they talk to each other, you know, trying to put it together. And then also, because if you just have the reveal, Ben, if you just have the answer, it doesn't give you time to try and work out aspects of it yourself.
I've got this locked in, ready? So when my family are watching Agatha Christie things and I come up early enough and see that it's on, I'm like, okay, this is on. I time it so I'm there for the last 10 minutes. And I do the most annoying thing possible, which is what this movie would have to have, right? This movie would be a multi-dimensional experience because I sit down, I watch that last 10 minutes, and then I ask 35 minutes of questions after it. Go, who was that guy? Why did he do this? Why are they doing that? What is this? So what you would need is this movie, and then you'd need somebody afterwards sitting next to you to go, hey, man, why'd they do that? And he would fill in the rest, or they would fill in the rest. I think I'm onto something here. Because when I'm watching these movies, all my brain is doing going, there's a twist, there's a twist, there's a twist, there's a twist, there's something coming, there's something. And my brain can't let that go, which is why I don't enjoy the genre until I get the twist. So what I need is an 120-minute movie of just reveal. And then I need somebody next to me for half an hour to explain why that reveal made sense. I think I'm onto something.
I think that experience would frustrate the person that you're sitting with so much that, you know, it may end friendships, right? So
that's why this person would have to it'd be their job. Like I wouldn't know this. Okay. They're part of the movie, really.
As long as you're paying them, that's fine.
I've had family members threaten to punch me over this.
Yeah. Yeah, I can, having known you for a long time, I can sympathize with that particular sentiment. But look, let's move on, though. Let's move on. I would like to find out what you have for us for next week.
Well, here's the twist. There is no new movie. This is the end of the podcast.
That was sudden for me.
Here's the turn. How do you feel?
Look, not great, because I like the build up, okay? So now, why don't you tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find us, and then I want to hear what we're looking at next time.
Here's the twist. You've been watching a podcast all along, and to continue watching us, you can do so in a few different places. Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. There's these awesome things underneath the videos or the sound bits where you can leave a comment and like them.
The sound bits?
Yeah.
I love it.
The play buttons, if you will, where you can leave a comment, you can like, you can even subscribe so you see future releases. In those comments, tell us what genre movie you love. Tell us what is your go-to genre. Or if you have a hot take on a genre, let us know that as well, because we're interested to hear. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so in 2 places. Jim_and_Ben is the place that is the Instagrams. And Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures is TikTok. Thank you so much for listening, but now it's time for my reveal. I'm picking a movie that is weird. It definitely was not successful on release. It is more of a cult classic now, and I really don't know if it holds up. Like, really, really don't. I remember wanting this movie to be awesome and thinking it was okay. So I'm curious to see if I like it a lot more now, because I think it's the sort of movie that the more experiences you have with other movies of its kind, the better it is. This movie stars Ben Stiller, Janine Garofalo, William H. Macy, and Jeffrey Rush. It also has Greg Kinnear in it. This movie is called Mystery Men.
Oh, man. Man.
I kind of expected that response.
Why you got to be that guy?
I think it's going to be better this time.
It's not. Okay.
It's going to be so good.
All right. Well,
every time I go to watch this movie, I'm like, it's going to be better. It's not.
Okay.
But it's going to be better this time.
Well, thank you. I guess we'll be watching Mystery Men between now and next week. I'm glad that this brings you joy, because
I knew there was going to not be a lot of fanfare and acceptance of this movie, and I was excited the whole time.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're excited. So have a good week. If you would like to join us for Mystery Men, feel free to join us next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye!